Hello, so this is Long-Term Housing Support Training by Muriel Emerson. Introduction and purpose. The purpose of this training is to provide professionals with the tools to help clients who have mental illness and are homeless. We aim to put clients into long-term housing and keep them there. The professional's purpose is to impact the client in a positive way, working towards a working relationship with the client, their needs, and housing. We will cover a variety of topics, including building a relationship with the client, discussing sensitive topics, building and maintaining a relationship with the landlord or property manager, and many others. This training provides professionals with the tools to make long-term housing a reality for clients who have mental illness and have been chronically homeless. The learning objective. Upon completion of this training, participants will be able to define chronic homelessness, understand the relationship between homelessness and mental illness, build rapport with clients, discuss difficult and sensitive topics that might hinder long-term housing, learn to teach and discuss important information such as building a relationship with the landlord, caring for your living space, consequences of not caring for your living space, record keeping, and living with roommates. So some materials needed will be a pencil and paper to take notes, a binder to keep notes and PowerPoint presentations in, and water. There are a few rules. All rules are for the benefit and protection of participants. Participants agree to keep private conversations and information shared in the meetings. Violators of this confidentiality could be removed from the training. No training member is ever required to answer any questions, ever, to participate in any activity, or to tell anything. While it is encouraged to share, it is not required. It is not uncommon for participants to simply listen. Show up and choose to be present. Treat this as the most important conversation you could be in silence or put away at technology. Allow every voice to be heard if they choose to speak. Food and drink are allowed if they do not cause a distraction. Based on our observations and experience, we have found that the personal use of electronic devices in training has become a significant distraction to the learning process. Therefore, laptop computers, cell phones, iPads, and other electronic devices may not be used in training. We ask that you refrain from wearing any body sprays, perfumes, and colognes, or any other product containing fragrance out of consideration for others who may be allergic to these products. This is a fragrance-free area. And finally, bring your humor and have fun. So some terms you're going to be hearing in this is going to be chronic homelessness, people who have experienced homelessness for at least a year or repeatedly and have been living with a disabling condition such as a serious mental illness, substance use disorder, or physical disability. Mental illness. And when we say mental illnesses, we are talking about health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Mental illnesses are associated with distress and/or problems functioning in social, work, and family activities. We're also going to be using the word rapport, which is a friendly, harmonious relationship, especially a relationship characterized by agreement, mutual understanding, or empathy that makes communication possible or easy. Motivational interviewing is a psychotherapeutic approach that attempts to move an individual away from a state of indecision or uncertainty and towards finding motivation to make positive decisions and accomplishing established goals. So the relationship with mental illness and homelessness. Mental illness, in addition to adverse childhood experiences and substance use, are risk factors for homelessness. Although estimates of the prevalence of mental illness vary, studies looking at mental illness in the homeless population have generally found a high prevalence of mental disorders. There is a link between psychiatric disorders and homelessness. The nature of this relationship is complicated. Regardless of mental health status, people who are homeless generally have a history marked by poverty and social disadvantage, including considerable poverty in childhood and lower levels of education, and they are likely to belong to an ethnic minority. Mental illness had preceded homelessness in about 2/3 of the cases. Homelessness, in turn, has been associated with poor mental health outcomes and may trigger or make certain types of disorders worse. For example, findings indicate that homelessness is related to higher levels of psychiatric distress and lower perceived levels of recovery from serious mental illness. This creates a never-ending loop of mental illness and homelessness. See here, we see a link between we have poor mental health can make it harder to cope with housing problems, which housing problems or homelessness can make your mental health worse, and it just goes on and on and on in a circle like that. So short-term versus long-term housing. When I say short-term housing, I mean housing that only lasts a few years, such as transitional housing or month-to-month housing programs such as Shelter Plus Care, General Assistance, and WRAP, which all can help a client get housed quickly. These services were designed to be short-term and conditional, but since there is a lack of affordable housing, have been extended in many cases. When I say long-term housing, I mean housing that has no time limits, and as long as the client is paying rent and following the lease, they can live there if they want to. So we can't talk about housing without talking about Housing First. Housing First is a program that allows those who are worse off, they may have mental health problems, addictions, or disabilities in addition to being homeless, to obtain immediate housing to straight from the street and become part of the community from then onwards. Once they are settled in, they can draw on a whole range of services and support tailored to their requirements, making it easier for them to stay in the housing provided and speeding up their recovery process. The problem with Housing First is a lot of housing assistance available are short-term in nature, such as General Assistance and Shelter Plus Care. Another problem is clients are getting housed and connected with therapists and other professionals, but do not know how to maintain housing. Sometimes clients don't realize their social worker can help them with these problems, such as learning to care for their new home, and other times they are just too embarrassed to ask. With any topic in the mental health field, we can't really do anything until we've established that rapport and building rapport and discussing difficult topics. So we're going to be going over it today. So there's an exercise I found that I think is interesting. Whenever you work with clients, the beginning always starts with building rapport with the client. Many of us in this room know how to build rapport. For this exercise, I want everyone to pair up with someone in the room, and I've handed a sheet that has 3 boxes for you to fill out: look, voice, and beginning. The purpose of this activity is to talk about how we welcome and develop rapport with clients. We know how we communicate with our client is essential to providing high quality and consistent services. This activity will give us a chance to talk about how we do this, and we'll set the stage for talking about a communication model that gives us a short checklist on using communication skills and how to use these skills with intention. So we will break out for 5 minutes for this exercise and then discuss for 5 more minutes, which would take about 10 minutes of the time. Okay. So I'm not gonna do that here because, so one training does not make an expert make. I found this on a different PowerPoint somebody had created. And I think it really goes through with motivational interviewing because we learned about this in college. Some people have practiced. But just one training does not make an expert. So another reason we're going over it. So motivational interviewing and chronic homelessness. So there's the 4 processes. Engage the client by listening. Establish a trusting, mutual, respectful working relationship in which priorities, wants, needs, and goals of both client and clinician can be shared. Work with the client to find a collaborative focus for possible change. An ongoing process in which the clinician seeks to understand the client's values and respects client's readiness for change. With a shared agenda or focus area, evoke information about the client's desire, ability, reasons, and need for change. Lastly, the clinicians support the client with coming up with a plan for change. I also have an image here I found that says R, rule. R, resist telling them what to do. Avoid telling, directing, or convincing your friend, or in this case client, about the right path to good health. U, understand their motivation. Seek to understand their values, needs, abilities, motivations, and potential barriers to changing behaviors. L, listen with empathy. Seek to understand their values, needs, abilities, motivations, and potential barriers to changing behaviors. In E, empower them. Work with your friend to set achievable goals and to identify techniques to overcome barriers. So this is some brief concept review for motivational interviewing. So the spirit, we have the partnership, acceptance, compassion, invoking. The ORs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Processes, engaging, focusing, evoking, planning. And then the two gold nuggets is listening to change talk, listen for change talk, and reflect that change talk. So in this case, for brief concept review, partnership, you're creating and establishing that rapport, that partnership with the individual to create the plan. You can evoke compassion for them and what they've been through and acceptance of their point of view. Asking open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries to get more out of the client of what exactly they want and engaging them. So for the two gold nuggets, this is listen for change talk. Now this can be, since we're focusing on supporting clients in their homes, and this could be something as small as they mentioned having difficulties cleaning, but they wish for this to change. This is change talk because they want to change the current housing solution they have. Or they mention, I have no money at the end of the month. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. This can also be change talk because they're mentioning that they want to change their current financial situation. So that was just a brief overview of concepts for that. So motivational interviewing and homelessness. MI provides a useful framework for working with individuals who are struggling with substance use, mental illness, and traumatic experiences, and/or experiencing homelessness. Within the spirit of MI is an appreciation for the challenges for changing learned behaviors, some of which may have been an important part of survival. So remember, a lack of motivation is often simply ambivalence. Reasons for and against are already there. If you argue for one side, an ambivalent person is likely to defend the other. As a person defends the status quo, the likelihood of change decreases. Resist the righting reflex, which is the desire to fix by giving advice or arguing for the good side of the ambivalence. So motivational interviewing and chronic homelessness. With the chronically homeless population, there are a few things to keep in mind. Even if they are recently housed, some of these things still apply. Recognize and respect the client's skills, capacities, and lived experiences. There may have been strategies for survival that are no longer beneficial to them, but you have to try not to judge. If it is something that is hurting them physically, emotionally, or housing-wise, it may need to be addressed in an appropriate way. As appropriate, involve community workers and support people, and where possible, make a plan to how to stay in contact. Consider which options will work best for the client. So effective collaboration with community agencies. Get to know the agency and its clients, service users, identify the needs of the service users understand how the agency works, which is assessment, frameworks, constraints, establish common goals and clear processes for sustainable service delivery. So consider the type of services the client needs and the resources available to provide these services. Agencies can sometimes assist with transport, host an interview, receive mail, and read correspondence. Agencies may be a referral point for non-legal need or non-mental health need. Be accessible and work on the relationship. So I think that's the important part with effective collaboration with community agencies, is to continually access and work on the relationship. Okay, so here we are with discussing difficult topics. When you work with clients, sometimes you find yourself facing a difficult conversation. You can feel the uncomfortableness of the situation in your entire body. Your muscles tense up and you sweat beads on your forehead and palms. This won't be pleasant, and nothing I can tell you will ever make it pleasant. But what I can do is give you some tips to help you do it well and feel a little more in control, and more importantly, when you face up to tough conversations and handle them well, they can lead a better client relationship. So your starting point. Always start with the end in mind and always have a plan. Isn't that just good project management? So what matters? Tough conversations are times when you often find yourself over speaking. You say more than you intended to say and complicate things with unnecessary detail. Knowing what matters and what does not will help you keep the conversation focused. Look for the core of the conversation and decide to exclude anything else. Have a plan. Go into your tough conversation with a plan, not a script. That would make it impersonal and inflexible. Think about what you need to say and how to say it. Also think about what you should avoid saying. The recriments and the blame, the blind allies that will distract you both from the real issue. Additionally, consider the process you'll use. The next steps will help you. Logistics for tough conversations. When and where you hold your tough conversations are important. More than the easy everyday conversations, which can happen anywhere and anytime. So end of the day, the end of the working days tend to be the best time for tough conversations that can upset the other person and you. It means you don't have to return to colleagues afterwards while you're coping with the mental and emotional processing. However, some conversations need you and your client to be at their sharpest. They are not as emotionally challenging, but they are mentally hard. Put these into the morning while you're both still at your most alert, freshness, and resilient. Safe place. Think about where to hold your tough conversations. It needs to be a place where you will both feel safe while being as comfortable as possible. Meeting in private is ideal, but these days it pays to be aware of the risks and discomforts either of you may feel. Is there a public-private space? You have 3 basic choices: home ground for you, home ground for them, or a neutral place. All have advantages. The biggest factor is the feeling of safety, comfort, and psychological advantage. If you're going to initiate the tough conversation, I would recommend you give up those advantages and let your client choose the venue. Offer to go to them. This will make the tough conversation a little easier for them. That, in turn, will make it easier for you. Testify. If your client feels at a disadvantage from the outset, they may be wary and defensive. They will be less open to your constructive suggestions. Tough conversations come down to interpersonal skills. The content of your tough conversation is important, but the wrapper is what will either form or break the barriers to connection between you and a now wary client. So listen well. At all times, the one secret to hosting a good conversation, tough or trivial, is your ability to listen well, and your ability to listen or to silence, or to incoherent struggles for understanding. will be a premium. Commit yourself to focus on the quality of your listening. The essence of a good conversation is asking questions and listening. If you give the gift of pure attention, two things will happen. First, your client will feel your respect for them and for your perspective on the issue that have led you to your tough conversation. And second, in that silence of your listening, it won't just be you who hears what your client is saying. They will hear it themselves too, and sometimes it will be for the first time hearing themselves say it. So you also need open body language. Relaxed, open, non-aggressive body language is best. This means upright, symmetric, and leaning neither too far forward nor too far back. This shows you are attentive and engaged. Concentrate on good eye contact when you are delivering difficult messages, but be ready to break eye contact if they look uncomfortable. Note how hard eye contact can be. It is pretty easy to keep eye contact when you are listening. It's far harder when you are speaking. Give them time. People need time to process challenging messages. This is true, even if they were sort of expecting them. Allow that time without filling it with questions, comments, or a defense of what you said. This is the gift of silence. As a bonus tip, if they ask you a question or make a point that is important to them, do not leap in and respond straight away. The message an immediate response gives is, your question was easy, your point was trivial. No one wants to be told that. Instead, pause and think for a couple seconds. The silence you give before responding says that was a challenging question, your point was a good one. So I need to think about what you said. How much more respectful is that response? So you also need to give them space. Also give them space to let their emotions out. It's part of how we deal with tough conversations. Encourage it, but not in an intrusive or nosy kind of way. Acknowledge the feelings they share, label the feeling you observe, but resist the temptation to dive in and tell your own story. Moving forward, once they have asked their questions and their emotions have cooled down, turn the conversation to the future. By the way, this may need to be a second conversation if the emotional temperature gets too high, so don't force it. Future thinking generates solutions. Ask questions like, what would you like to have happen as a result of this conversation? What do you see as the next step for us? You can also introduce your own hopes and aspirations. Future thinking is far more valuable than present thinking or past thinking. Present thinking focuses on the rights and wrongs of the situation, along with mismatches in perceptions. Past thinking tends to be focused on blame. None of this is useful in setting the relationship on track and working together for your mutual benefit. Cool down. After your tough conversation, take some time to cool down. Never schedule another meeting straight after one of these. You may want to be on your own for a while, or maybe you have a trusted colleague who can listen to you as you share the non-confidential aspects of what happened. At the end of the day, or the next morning, make a space to reflect on what happened, what went well, what did not, what did you learn, and how would you modify your approach if you had to do it again? And perhaps most importantly, what is the follow-up you need to make to ensure that the hard work you put into the tough conversation does not go to waste? Remember, strengthening relationships means demonstrating trustworthiness. Now, would be all the worst of times to forget a promise or renegade on a commitment. So I have an activity we're going to do before ending. Break into pairs. You will have 20 minutes to complete this exercise. Plan to spend the first 10 minutes focused on one partner and the remaining 10 minutes focused on the other partner. So first, I handed out a sheet for this. You have to share a difficult conversation that you reflected on with your partner, and evaluate how you did against each of these 7 steps: listening, asking, summarizing, validating, expressing, negotiating, and committing. And then the next part After filling out the 7 steps, now identify which steps you found most challenging. With your partner, brainstorm 3 things you could have done to be more effective at that step in the conversation. Practice that step with your partner. Have them play the role of your counterpart in the difficult conversation you are reenacting. So once again, it's more beneficial to start with one partner and then the other one's point of view for this exercise. And then, so that would be for about 20 minutes. And then I'd say we come back, we discuss what people had problems with, and how they could make that better. Is the end.